there's always something to learn when you both say no to something or someone says no to you. And part of it is maybe having the courage to understand why, both reflecting for yourself, but also maybe asking the question of the other person why they said no. You get a lot of no's in general in life, and suddenly when it's your business, you take it to a different level and you accept, but then you also learn from it, but you can take further action. And like a good sales executive, no is the start of the next conversation, and it may be the beginning of the better conversation.
I love that.
Welcome to the Warriors at Work show. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host. This is a show for men and women in the workplace who want to move from the predictable to the potent. This is your weekly dose of inspiration with an edge. I talk with CEOs and shamans, sports marketing executives and therapists. All of us are like-minded thinkers and doers who tell stories, share wisdom, and challenge each other to have the best life possible inside and outside the office. Welcome to your Warrior Conversation.
My next warrior is Steve Schloss, an accomplished chief people officer who left a lucrative career to follow his heart and his passion to help leaders and teams listen forward. Steve is a big thinker, a great listener, and curious about everything. So much to learn from Steve. I am so curious to hear about your 2022 through a couple of different lenses. First, tell us, when you think of 2022 and the word gratitude, tell me what comes up for you.
I'd say there are a few things. First of all, I officially had stepped down from my role as a chief people officer. And as I've said to people, I'm a recovering chief people officer. And in the process, I'd say there's two people that I'd consider when you're talking about gratitude. One is clearly my wife, Barbara, who, in the moment that I made a decision 2.5 years ago to begin the journey to go out on my own and to both work as a coach and an advisor and a facilitator, but also work now as an operating partner for a growth equity firm, that's a very different lifestyle and approach than a career of being an executive. And so she's always been supportive of my endeavors to push myself outside of my comfort zone. And if there's one thing that she provides me, I think, is a great sense of clarity and honesty, because if there's anybody who knows me well enough to know when I'm fooling myself, she's that person. So that actually she's certainly number one on the list. Number two is someone that I actually used to work with at the USGA. His name is Dave Asnavorian. And Dave is a great human being, but also an influential person in the sport of golf that I worked in for the last 8 years. And Dave has been my editor. He's been my editor for my writing that I do, mostly through the lens of posts that I share on LinkedIn through my Medium page. And what I love about Dave is that he brings and he accentuates my voice in a way that he does a great job at. And one of the things that I learned, and Dave was someone who really has been a great partner here, is that when you put your content out into the world, whether it's this or specifically the written content, as someone who did not spend lots of time writing, but now doing it more intentionally as part of my practice or even my work with Edison Partners, I suddenly was a little more stressed over what I'm saying, how I'm saying it. Will people take it seriously? What's the reaction? And Dave has been someone who has just really helped me calm myself down and realize right from the beginning that, A, you have a lot to say, it's worth saying, and people should listen. But more so that hitting send and hitting publish on something is nothing to be stressed about. And I found that out doing the first post 9 months ago. but it was one of those moments where I realized, a friend like Dave, who's also a great editor, and I recommend to anybody have a good editor for anything that you write.
Mm-hmm.
So I have enormous gratitude for Dave.
I love that. I love that you name two people too. So a big part of always reflecting, I find, is looking at those moments of challenge, right? What is the that expression they say in Buddhism? You cannot know joy until you know pain.
Right.
And so I'm characterizing it as fall forward moments. So share with us, when you think about 2022, what was a fall forward moment for you?
I'd say a fall forward moment was early in the journey of being declined as a coach in two different situations. One, I declined it, and one, I was declined.
Mm,
And in both of those situations, you realize the importance of rejection early on in the process of going out on your own. And rejection is a motivator. It's also a recognition that it doesn't matter what you're doing in building a business, rejection just comes with it.
mhm.
And as the World Series is going on right now, and a great hitter is batting 300, that means 3 out of 10 hits. You have to go in with that mindset that it's not always a win, or it may take time for the wins to happen. And so, after being a senior executive, where while you're representing the interests of an organization, the risks don't feel as personal and directly
Yeah,
impactful.
so
Now it's a
true.
more humbling experience. And at the same time, though, it also, one of the greatest fears that I had going into going out on my own is the fear of rejection, but more importantly, the fear or the words that I heard from others around developing business and going out and actually cultivating relationships in this new environment of being a practitioner versus an executive where others wanted my attention. I was now on their side of the table. I love it. I love being on the side of the table where I have to develop business and develop my own sense of how I do so and develop my way of interacting with people. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't,
Mm.
but I don't stress about it as much as I thought I was. And in fact, I enjoy it more than I thought I would.
Yeah, the rejection. It's funny. I frame it as I wasn't a fit. They weren't a fit for me, and or I wasn't a fit for them. And then going a step further to say, what would I do different for the next time I'm in front of XYZ company? I think that's really powerful. I'm curious too. So I'm sure you're constantly being reached out to for advice and counsel from all people in all walks of life. How would you take that experience and frame it in some sort of advice or counseling way so that
Hmm.
they could get something from that lesson?
Well, I think, as you said, there's always something to learn when you both say no to something or someone says no to you. And part of it is maybe having the courage to understand why, both reflecting for yourself, but also maybe asking the question of the other person why they said no. I'll give you
Mm,
an example. In the case of this particular coaching assignment, I was actually really excited about the possibility. And by the
mm,
time I finished my conversation with the prospective C level executive, um, it was clear at the end of the call that the way I approached it probably could have been better, but I
mm,
felt like I needed to ask this person their feedback. And so I sent this person a note once I heard that this person went in another direction. And I reached out to this person directly and said, "Hey, look, help me if you wouldn't mind." And they offered a piece of advice which was very helpful, but they also said, to be honest with you, I would love to bring you on as an advisor, even less so than a coach, because you asked me a couple of questions that were really thought-provoking, that as an advisor really are helpful, as a coach less helpful. And so if you'd be
Mm.
willing to work as an advisor for me on a specific project I have coming up, is that something you'd be interested in? And so the reality of it was, no is to me the beginning of another conversation as opposed to the end of something that you now move on to the next thing.
Wow. And you may not have even received that opportunity had you not been curious as to what was behind the no. And a lot of
Correct.
people won't ask. They'll just take it as, "Oh, go over here."
Correct. And you know what? It's not something I probably typically would have done, but I guess it was a moment where my ego got in the way saying, okay, I got to find out what happened. And
Yeah.
as it turns out, it was worth it. And, you get a lot of no's in general in life. And suddenly, when it's your business, you take it to a different level and you accept, but then you also learn from it. But you can take further action. And like a good sales executive, no is the start of the next conversation, and it may be the beginning of the better conversation.
I love that. I love that. So you've given so much great wisdom here. I'm like starting to think about places where I could ask better questions around no's, just generally. That's a huge lesson here. So Steve, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your heart, and really, really grateful for your time.
My pleasure. I'm glad we had a chance to connect.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Warriors at Work show. If you are interested in learning more about what we do at the Warriors at Work show and platform, be sure to go over to my website, Jeannie Coomber, and subscribe to my monthly Warrior Playbook newsletter. I share everything that I'm up to month by month, as well as some lessons and insights that I've learned. I'm also interested in hearing any feedback you have about this conversation or future topics. So reach out to me directly on jc@jeanniecoomber.com or on LinkedIn. Be sure to tell your friends and your colleagues about this Warriors at Work conversation. Subscribe, review, and rate us. It's the best way to get this message out into the world. Be well.